Yo guys, what is up? Here we are for another reading video. We are on chapter 8. Dang, we've been on a lot of chapters. And maybe, depending on how long it takes for the first chapter, I'm going to do 2 chapters at once. Because I've just been reading bits while I try to get to the right chapter. And it's a really exciting chapter, so I'm really excited. Today's shout out book goes to, because I don't think I've ever done this one. It is, let's see, what should I do? Yeah, so we have an author today. We have Stephen E. Ambrose. He is a very good historian, author. So he's really good to read. Probably for the older people listening to this. Because you definitely have to know kind of the content to understand him. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Chapter 8. And remember, this is just after Miss Tally has been killed, executed, for being a spy and member of the Alliance. So we're going to pick up right there. Chapter 8. A few days later, as the stars winked across the sky, Zara tiptoed towards her uncle's bedroom. She leaned her ear against the door until she heard the familiar sound, the soft, fluttery snores. Good, she thought. He'll be out for a few hours at least. Tiptoeing back, Zara glanced at her clock, 9:42 p.m., and slid on her grandfather's old wool coat. It was 3 sizes too big on her narrow frame, but it had ample pockets, which she would need for tonight. Even better, the coat should camouflage her figure. From far away, it would make her look like a man, or at the very least, a skinny boy. With her fingers moving silently, Zara slipped a hunting knife into her right pocket and a can of spray paint into the left. She reached the window latch, but her hand stilled when she glimpsed the photograph on her nightstand. Her fingers brushed against the frame, and the grief hit her all over again. "Oh, Miss Tally," she said. Days may have passed since the execution, but Zara's eyes had yet to dry. She stared at the wrinkled photo, one of the very few she had of Miss Tally. It was taken right before Mission Medsger, one of the last remnants of the old Greenfield Alliance. I need to, just so you know, my nose is stuffed up, so if I sound weird, that is why. Her thumb grazed over the faces that smiled up at her. Miss Tally up front, Zara's mother behind her, Uncle Red to the right, Miss Abigail O in the corner, and so many more, all of them smiling. Now, nearly all of them were dead. When the Alliance first announced its plan to take over Fort Medsger, the Greenfield chapter had volunteered immediately. Zara's mother and Uncle Red had spent months gathering weapons, Glock pistols, German rifles, and the occasional crate of C4. Zara remembered them huddled over the kitchen table at night, discussing logistics, using words she didn't understand, like high ground and culminating point. Oftentimes, she found them asleep at the table in the morning, their uncle snoring and her mom red curls a tangled mess upon her head. They'd made a good team. Uncle Red plotted the strategies while Annie drummed up new members. Together they had grown their chapter from a mishmash of farmers to a bona fide player in the Alliance. As a reward for their hard work, they had been given a prominent position for the attack on Fort Medsger, leading the Southern Charge. Honestly, I would never want to lead a charge, because usually you're the first people that get hit. Just thinking. But that night had ended in disaster. After Colonel Eckhart alerted the fort to the Alliance's plans, the Nazis struck with a hard and swift fist. When it was all over, thousands of rebels had been imprisoned and thousands more executed, wiping out over half the Alliance in one night. Zara's mother had taken a bullet to the chest during the escape, but Uncle Red had managed to pull her to safety and had bribed a farmer to take them south. The rest of the chapter hadn't been so lucky. 200 had perished during the raid, including Arthur Tally and Zara's mother, who bled out on the way home. When Uncle Red arrived at the Tally's cottage, he broke the news to Miss Tally first before he found Zara in the bedroom, watching a German cartoon on the ancient black and white television. He crouched down next to her, hugged her so tight that she thought her and hugged her so tight that she thought her lungs would stop working. "Where's Mama?" she had asked. Zara couldn't think about that day without her heart hurting. She'd lost her mother, and in a way she'd lost her uncle too. Something had broken inside of him. Something more than bone and muscle. She felt that same way now. Broken, beaten, her insides hollowed out, a dull rage throbbing through her. But she wouldn't let the Nazis defeat her, like they had defeated Uncle Red. She had to keep fighting. She couldn't let caution overtake her soul any more. The clock's hand hit 9:45, and Zara knew she had to be quick. She crept down the stairs and out the black door into the spring-sweetened air. The night was black as oil, without a sliver of moon. But Zara had walked this path so many times that she only needed starlight to guide her. When she reached the town limits, she slipped through the alleyways, careful to avoid any Germans out for a stroll or a cigarette break. Fortunately, it was Monday. Most of the residents had long since retreated to their homes to watch their Berlin television dramas or devour a second helping of cabbage rolls and fried potatoes. She was alone in the night. The courthouse lay due north of her. Zara hid behind a broken street lamp right before the cleaning ladies. Three middle-aged women with pecan-colored skin walked up the front doors. There were only a handful of blacks in Greenfield, and nearly all of them worked at the mines. But a few of the women had landed janitorial jobs at night, long after the Nazis had headed home for the day. The three women shuffled out of sight, and Zara pulled on a knitted face mask that she had spent hours making the previous night. The mask was a bit too snug. She wasn't much of a knitter like Miss Tally had been, but it would have to do. Now all she needed was to run up the courthouse, get the job done, and run back home. "It'll be simple," Zara told herself, but her pulse thumped anyway. If she wasn't careful, if anyone saw her, she would land in a jail cell, no questions asked. Perhaps she should have waited a couple more days. Even her mothers had spent weeks planning missions. But Zara wouldn't lose her nerve now. Forcing her legs into a run, she gathered every speck of courage and ducked behind a row of hedges across from the courthouse. Her gaze flew upward, towards the security camera pointed at the entrance. She had spotted the camera yesterday when she was scouting the premises for her mission tonight. Maybe her uncle's caution had rubbed off on her after all. Zara glanced over both shoulders before she could charge a tomato in her right hand, as tall as a pitcher of milk. "Destroy," she commanded. The tornado tore into the vise, ripping off its lens and exposing its wires. Barely 10 seconds had passed before the camera shattered into a clump of metal and glass. Satisfied, Zara repeated this process 5 more times, aiming for the courthouse front lights until the entrance was plunged into darkness. It was now or never. Holding her breath, Zara ran up the building steps. Her veins spiked with adrenaline. She called up the wind and commanded it to lift her. Her feet left the ground, raising her higher and higher until she was floating face to face with the Führer's portrait. The sight of him, anger pumped through Zara, hot like a skillet, and she reached for the knife in her pocket. The Führer's oily eyes, as big as her fists, seemed to follow her as she made the first cut. A couple of slits through those eyes, a slice through the chin. Zara's hand slashed faster, moving with a fury that matched the turmoil boiling through her. For Miss Tally. Zara slit the Führer's nose. For Molly, she cut through his ear. For my mom. The blade severed the mouth in half. A scream built in Zara's throat for everyone she had lost, for all of the Führer's regime had taken away from her. But she channeled the scream into her night, hacking at the portrait until it hung in limp ribbons. But even then, she wasn't finished. Twisting off the paint cap, she sprayed its contents over the shredded canvas, blasting Dieter's nose and the glittering metals that adorned his suit. She didn't stop until the portrait had turned into a shrouded black mess. With breasts growing labored, Zara studied her at her handiwork. Stared. The colonel would be livid, no doubt. No one had vandalized the Führer's portrait in over a decade, and yet only a hollow victory rang in her ears. This wouldn't bring Miss Tally back. She would never see her friend again, no matter how many portraits she destroyed. Zara felt defeated all over again. Landing on the steps, she sprinted down the street, wanting nothing more than to fall into a bed and sleep until her heart stopped hurting. She reached for the mask, ready to tear off the scratchy thing, and then she rounded a corner and knocked into a woman in a wheelchair. The woman cried out. Zara tried to whirl away, but her foot caught on one of the wheels, and she ended up sprawled on the sidewalk instead. The woman cried louder, and the man escorting her, a young man with a head full of loose curls, tried to soothe her. He held a small telescope underneath his arm, which they must have been using to stargaze on this moonless night. That would explain why the two of them were out so late. "It's all right, Mother. We're nearly home," he said in German. He turned to Zara. "Can I help you, sir?" Zara looked up. Oh no. Bastian's body went rigid when he saw her mask. His arms spread out to shield his mother. "We don't have any money with us," he said. Zara ignored the tweak in her ankle and took off running, her legs pumping like a machine. Her legs pumping beneath her like two machines. She waited for Bastian to shout at her, to throw threats about telling his father, but she heard nothing as she dashed through the street. She didn't stop until she left the Greenfield town limits, and when she mustered the courage to look back, she only saw an empty road behind her. She was safe, at least for now. Well, that was an exciting chapter, like I said, and there actually ends up the next chapter is also very exciting. So, yeah, I am excited, and yeah, so make sure to subscribe, like, comment down below. And if you guys have any good books that you know of, be sure to recommend them. I will look into them and see what I can do, because I really do enjoy these reading videos. So, actually, right now what's going to happen is, I know this is a weird time to say it, but I am considering deleting all of my blog videos except for the 4th of July one. And what I'm going to do is I'm then going to keep this channel as it is with reading videos. I'm going to open up a new channel. I've not yet decided what to call it. All of that is still in the process, but it's going to be my view, a kid's view on what's going on in the world right now. So it should be really good. And I will see... No, I won't see you. You will hear me next week. See you later.